Right, hi guys, quick video for you. This is reference the throttle body. This is my old 3200. The problem is, well, the throttle's never really been attached to the engine properly. Get that running. Really poor throttle response, but it's worse than that. It feels to me like there's a worn zone. I know they use carbon brushes onto a piece of material. So what we're going to do today is we have got a kit which is going to involve removing the old system, which I'll show you, and replacing it with a new one. The new one's magnetic, so it doesn't have the same problems. This has two units on it either end, and the kit just replaces one of those. I think it was kind of a safety thing and they had to read the same, etc. They did it with the throttle pedal end as well. Anyway, we'll rip it apart and we'll see what happens. Okay, before we start, we need a pair of gloves to keep your hands clean, of course, and do not try it with any other colour gloves apart from orange. This particular model will not like that at all. So we'll get these on and we'll start looking at taking this top cover off here, and front pipe and wiring and any other bits I think I have to take off. Okay, so need to take the screws out of this. This is on opposite side actuator. So that's the back on this end, that's the front. So undo the 4 screws. This doesn't feel like it wants to come off very easily because it's basically breaking away from here, as you can see, but that doesn't matter. Okay, and then effectively the new one is different. The shaft doesn't go inside this one, so that shaft actually needs to be cut down just above where the nut is, and then we put the magnetic sender section on there. So we're going to do that. What I've also done here, because I wanted to see if that was important as I broke that away, is, and that's what it looks like from the top. And I've taken this off. Now I didn't bother too much trying to take this off particularly nicely because the kit I bought comes with a new top plate, but just run a Stanley knife around the edge and then gently lever it up and take that off. Okay, so we need to now, the cable comes up through here, through the end that we've replaced. We need to come across to here because it's got a sensor this end as well. So it'll only be using the single sensor, the new one, so we need to bring a wire along from here and we need to solder it onto the connections underneath this green material, which we need to get out. What we also need to do, because there's still a sensor here, which is this one, is we need to disconnect this sensor, and I'll show you that once we get underneath this green stuff. Okay, so I have just got a little grinding disc and Dremel, just had a little sort of dig around in there. Sometimes this potting can be soft, sometimes it's a bit rubbery. This one's a bit rubbery, and now I'm just, so we don't damage anything, just getting in there manually with a screwdriver and just revealing these contacts, because effectively what we have to do is we need to connect the contacts to the throttle body itself. Whoops, put it in the vise properly. But we also need to disconnect this sensor. This sensor is still working. There's 2 sets of contacts in here. We need to disconnect that sensor and solder the wire from this side onto here. But I'll show you that once I've got a bit cleaner, so I'm just going to carry on digging away in here. Okay, now you can see I'm just picking away to reveal these contacts. So I've got to carry on doing that until I get to the contacts, and then remember which one we've got to solder the wire to. Okay, so I'm still digging. Allow a bit of extra time for digging because it is a pain in the backside. Number 2, I believe, is the correct one. Running this way, 1 on the left, 2 the one that's most uncovered at the moment, and I need to find the connection under here that connects it to the other sensor. So I'll keep digging. Okay, so I was having a bit of difficulty deciding where the brake is, or where the 2 bits to separate. But they're actually soldered, which wasn't clear to me. So we're just going to get a soldering iron on there, and yeah, just put them apart. Okay, so as you can see, I've managed to separate those two bits now. This section here, I'm wobbling. This section here, whoops, I've peeled back and it's come away from the section and I've pushed that back. I'm going to do a bit better than that, but we need to solder onto this one because this is the bit that goes to this unit. This one is the old signal sensor, which we're not using anymore, from that one at the end. So dig them out. I actually used a pair of side cutters, very nice, sharp, sexy side cutters, and just cut, because they are, I thought they were soldered, didn't seem to come apart using solder, so I just cut them. I think they're probably sort of instant welded or something like that, just heat welded, not sure, but cutters in between the two sections, just cut it and then prise them apart. Okay, we get a literally wire from here over to here, we'll get it soldered onto the correct one. Okay, so we are just cutting just above the nut, just cutting that off. Okay, and then we are going to remove this nut like this. Don't do what I did, I've grazed, ever so slightly grazed this area here. Now there's a seal on the back and that needs to seal. It'll be okay on this one, but avoid doing that. And then this just sits on the top like that, and then you put the nut back on. Make sure you don't drop this section because they're quite delicate. And then I'm gonna stick a bit of Loctite on there before we do that up. Okay, that's what it should look like when done. There's a little bit of nut thread running at the top, but that's as far as the thread is on that before you cut it off anyway. So nicely secured. Obviously make sure when you tighten up you don't damage the butterfly. Okay, so now you can see I've cleaned and dug out these pins, because effectively those pins have to connect to these 3 pins. So we're going to pop that in there and solder them together. What I'm going to do first though is I'm going to tin, well, all of them actually, but I'm going to tin these connectors first, because if you tin them first they just solder much more nicely I should say. Just got a text come through. Okay, so I have tinned those up, and I have tinned those up, and when we put it together it's almost just a case then of touching the soldering iron and they will bond together. Let's do that. So we've got that bolted back in. I did put a little bit of sealant by that slightly nicked area, and then we'll come around here, I'll show you that from the top, make sure that that wire doesn't get caught, and you'll get a bit of spring tension onto those contacts that you saw that we tinned earlier. So I'll flip it up the other way and have a look. Okay, looking down from the top, you can see this wire is nicely out of the way, and we need to get in and just the 2 bits I tinned there, we need to basically just touch the iron on them, make sure those are soldered together properly. Okay, so we've got all those soldered together, keeping this wire out of the way, and then we need to take this wire across here and solder it to the pin that we've pulled apart. So we don't want this connected to the whole affair. This is the one we need, so we're just soldering this to this, which I shall do now. Okay, so I have got that cable from there to there. I've put a bit of heat shrink over there, and I might insulate those others as well, because I've got to do something to sort of tidy those up a bit. They don't do anything, but we don't want any shorting. They're not likely to, but I might put a bit of silicone in there. And I've also put a little bit of heat shrink there, just to protect it a bit more as an extra sheath as it comes up through there. And then what we'll do effectively is we'll just tuck this wiring in around here and lay that down nicely. Okay, so I'm going to just clean out around the edges so the plate sits on nice. The new plate, that's the new plate I mentioned. And you can see that is wired on there. I put a couple of bits of heat shrink just to insulate the ones that are close. I'll put a load of silicone in there. A bit of tape to hold it out of the way while I put the lid on. And then same down there, we need to put something in there. Probably won't get damp, but may as well put it back as was. But all I'm going to do now is fit it to the car, make sure everything works okay before I seal it down. Okay, so that is the throttle body back on the car. All bolted up, plugs in just here, on that connection there. all connected back up. So we'll start her up and see what happens. I'll even record my face, so if it all goes horribly wrong, you can have a laugh.
This is the kit that I bought off eBay. Okay, so the result of that was I put it back together and I've got a CL check engine light. So I just need to look into that and I will let you know what fixes that. So these are the fault codes that are coming up.